How's it going, guys, and welcome to the video. I've loved learning and performing magic for a very long time, but I've only been sharing magic tutorials really for the last year or so on this channel. What I do on this channel is I go through the classic magic books. These are in the public domain. You could go read them yourself. Many of these resources are very foundational to magic, but what I seek to provide to you on the channel is video teaching so that you can hopefully learn them in an accessible and easy to learn way. So thank you to those of you who have joined me on this journey, and if you're new here, subscribe to learn more magic. This video contains some of the most popular video tutorials from this calendar year so far. So at the time of this release, it's about halfway through the year. These are 10 of some of the most popular videos from the year. I think you're really gonna enjoy what we have here. We have card magic, we have coin magic, false shuffles, mentalism, cardistry, even one of my own creations. So I hope you enjoy. Sit back, relax, use the time codes if you want to jump around, and drop a like if you enjoy this video. What's up, guys? I am stoked to share this secret with you today. Under this King of Diamonds, there's a few things going on. So we have the card that gets vanished is cut out in this way. I did like a little trapezoid. And then this King of Diamonds is taped to another card, and the rest of that 5 of clubs is just taped onto that card as well. So it creates like a little puzzle piece, right? And then when these are taped together, none of the queen is actually taped to any of the King of Diamonds. The queen is taped to this piece of the Vanish card, and then that piece is taped to the king. So they are only connected by that one little piece. Does that make sense? So this plays upon a principle that does exist in, other aspects of magic, of almost creating like a pocket that you have within a card. But the way we're using it in this case is to hide this card. You're able to like kind of shake it around and it just kind of falls into place. And that's all due to that puzzle piece coming together. Now you can experiment with different shapes to cut into this card, which I certainly have. The reason I like the small trapezoid is, look, you can almost get as much of the card as possible before you expose it, which means you also don't have like an entire edge being exposed. I think one way I used to do it was more of a reverse, where I had it cut here, had a jut out, and then cut here, but then you can't show this much of the card. So this is great. Now it is 3 cards thick, and that's just always going to be the case with this gimmick. So you do have the thickness factor and even potential discrepancies with a paired card. Like if you did this with a Joker, or as I've done it with another king, you kind of always have that situation, right? And so handling is going to be very important for this. But how cool is that? Like if you have a deck of cards right now and double stick tape and scissors, you are done. Like you could make this right now. It'll take you 5 minutes. So let's talk about all the potential things you can do with this now that you've made your cool little gimmick. So something interesting about this is, because this card is contained within here, you have kind of this factor where you can't show it front and back when it's in a sandwich position. What you can do to get around that is this little subtlety where you can display the card and then turn over and show it and then go back. Okay, same thing goes from the front. If you're holding it in this way, you obviously couldn't show that or it would reveal it. So you can just kind of reference it. And this is, I feel like this kind of plays on 3-card Monty, different moves like that, where that turnover, you kind of hide the fact of what's going on. So if you want to show both sides, you can show here, and come back. Then you're going to hold it in a way where, like in my hand, I'm left-handed. If the cards are going from left to right like this, from bottom to top, then when I just kind of glide my hand over, gravity will it'll just nest that card into place, which is super, super cool. You can also vanish it on the table, which I think is a huge advantage of this. So it is a slow change. It's not a visual change. That's where you get your elastics and flaps. So the advantages of this are what you want to play to, is that you can make a very clean display. You're not having to hold pressure on these cards, right? It's just sliding into place. Now, if you want, and I believe this replicates some sort of illusions that you're able to do with maybe arranging normal cards in certain ways. So I think that principle is out there. But with the gimmick version, you can show this one side and then have a card appear. It's a little more subtle. It's not as like wow factor as I would want it to be, but it is there. So sometimes a limitation can become a strength, right? So you show the 2 kings, and a card appears in between them. I don't know. It is what it is. You can have another card hidden under the card and do a very simple card change. And so that would look like just loading it all together. You can show it front and back since we have that extra card this time. And then you can do the Vanish in the same way and show the card. So because this is a thick card, remember to square up and just use the other card to your advantage. So not displaying this card on its own too often and displaying it under the other card. So for just a chill performance where you're just showing people, I think you can come under and you have a lot of play here with like a pinky break, and you can just bring it out like, hey, I have a stack of 3 cards, right? Here's the card. You make it Vanish and then you go from there. But let's try to take this a step further. So let's say you force that 5 of clubs and then you do a more normal sandwich routine. But let's say you've revealed a normal 5 of clubs and you're just keeping that gimmick hidden for now. And so you can do that. You can maybe do 1 or 2 phases of that. Then you're going to talk about reversing it. So when it comes down to it, this can be the final phase of a sandwich routine where you put the real 5 of clubs on top of the deck, and then you're going to place the gimmick card on top. And you're going to act as though you're coming over and putting the 5 of clubs in between them again. But what you're really doing is extending the gimmick and getting into position. So now the 5 of clubs is here, and you have the gimmick loaded with the 5 of clubs, and you can turn it over to have it placed in the spectator's hand. So this is playing on, actual coin turtles and, scotch and soda idea. If we can place it in the spectator's hand, that's going to be great. So then you do need to get this card to go face up into the middle of the deck. You could also, palm it into your pocket or a card to wallet if you want to go that far. So then you can put a lot of heat on this where you have them gather up the cards themselves, just have them square it up. And then you do need to come over. That's a limit of this gimmick because it's still a gimmick, but you can come over and just display the cards. And then we can go to the deck or your pocket or wherever you've now loaded the card. And that's a good final twist for a sandwich routine. So do be careful. There is some trouble you might get into if you get it in a spot where it won't square up. I guess the main way that happens is if this side intersects or collides with the piece that it's running into. And so if you have it down here, it won't coalesce. So you do have a lot of play, but just be aware of where the gimmick is and keep it relatively straight. That way you can do this. But it is fun to, I think an advantage of this is that you don't have to be perfectly straight. You can kind of display it like a normal human being, and then you just get into position and you can square it up. Even if it's a little angled beforehand, you can still square it up from there. Real quickly, just wanted to pause the video here to shout out my channel member. Thank you so much for supporting me on this channel. You heard me mention at the top that what I do on this channel is I go back into those public domain, foundational, classic magic resources, and I teach a few tricks every month on here so that you get the benefit of learning some of these great magic tricks in video format. But if you want a little bit more, there's a couple things you can do. You can join this channel as a member at the supporter tier. You get exclusive badges for that. But if you go to the insider tier, you also get those tutorials earlier than everyone else. Something I've also sprinkled on top of that as an extra thank you is bonus tricks. So the free videos are still coming, they won't change, but as an extra thank you to insider members, I throw some bonus tricks in there from those same resources I'm teaching from. So check that out if you're interested. It's just a way for me to say thank you and another way to support me. But with all that said, let's get back into the video. So the French drops look something like this. And what you're doing is, it is another fake take, but it's a little bit different. So you're gonna come over, you're holding it up like this, where your thumb is holding it and the edges of your fingers are holding it. You come over as though you're gonna grab it, and then you're gonna drop it into your fingers as you come over. So when it's under that cover, you're gonna just release enough pressure for it to fall into your hands, just like that. So combined with the cover, you can then come up as though you're grabbing it, curl your hand into a ball. Of course, the finger palm hand comes down to a natural position, and you can make it seem to vanish. Rick Holcomb is a great coin magician here on YouTube, and he talked through some subtleties on his public free video on the subject. So shout out to him. He added a little subtlety of the motion idea. And so if you use some motion where you're going over from one hand to another, not only with this move, but with others, that's going to help you with the psychology of the illusion. He also added this little twist as he comes through where things are just in motion. And that seems to add to the effectiveness of the move. So again, the French drop, you come over, you drop it, you make it seem to vanish. And as I've been saying with the case of all these, it's going to be helpful in the context of the routine to have that coin appear somewhere else or to be able to do something else with your hands. Do you want to learn an easy way to read people's minds? How about a way to guess a card or multiple cards they've selected without markings and without even looking at the card? You can even use this method to deal yourself certain cards. Well, if you want to learn how to do all that, it is time to introduce you to the Cy Stebbins stack. A little bit of a, I guess it can be an underrated stack if you move on to mnemonic, for those of you who are aware of it. But I think there's still value that this stack has. It was the first stack I learned before mnemonic. And I'm not just going to teach you the stack. I'm not just going to teach you one trick with the stack. I'm going to teach you 3 tricks in this video. So if you like magic content like this, like and subscribe, you know all the things, but let's get into it. So here's the stack all the way through, from the top all the way down through here to the 10 of clubs connects to the King of Hearts, all the way down through here. So I try to get every card showing. This is the Cy Stebbins stack, so feel free to take a screenshot of it if you'd like. But this stack comes from, of course, the magician Cy Stebbins. It's a very old principle at this point. He taught it in the book called Card Tricks and the Way They Are Performed, and you can get that book online for free as it is in the public domain. And all the tricks he taught in that book were surrounding the Cy Stebbins stack, but we'll focus on some of my favorites. But if you're wondering how this system works, it's 2 simple things. First is the idea of chased order. So I'll put this here to make it easier on me. It goes clubs, hearts, spades, diamonds. Now the way he preferred to list it was hearts, spades, diamonds, clubs, but you're able to use the acronym chased if you remember clubs, hearts, spades, diamonds. That of course doesn't include the A, but you can imagine CHSD, and that's the order you have: clubs, hearts, spades, diamonds, from top to bottom. So if I'm looking at here at the bottom, a diamonds, I know we're starting back over at clubs. If I cut the deck and I'm looking at a hearts, I know that goes before spades. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is simply that you add 3. So here I cut the deck, I have a 9 of spades, I go up 10, 11, which is jack, queen is then the third option. So I know it's a queen, and then this is the spades, so I'm going to go to diamonds. It's the queen of diamonds. So this is how, by looking at any bottom card of the deck, you're going to be able to know what the top card is. So let's try one more here. We have the 5 of hearts. What do you think this is going to be? I'll give you a few seconds. Yes, it is going to be the 8 of spades. There you go. So this is how, without a marking or even seeing the card, you're able to guess the card, because by them taking a card out of the deck, all you have to do is cut to where that card was. I'm looking at the 8 of clubs, I'm adding 3, and I'm going from clubs to hearts, so I know that it's the jack of hearts. So let's start this from the beginning. You can use any false shuffle you want in order to make these cards look truly mixed. You can also give them a quick flash. They will look very mixed. They'll look very random upon a cursory glance. The other thing you can do in addition to false shuffles is authentic cuts. And you can even pair this by saying, all right, I'm just going to give the deck a quick shuffle, and here, why don't you cut it? So they'll cut it themselves. So for the first trick, after you've kind of presented the get ready as just sort of casually holding the deck and shuffling it, those are some kind of casual provers, you can do a couple things for this first trick. And in the first trick, we're just guessing one card. So after they've cut the deck for you, you can have them look at that card as their selection. So maybe what you'll say is, hey, just go ahead and cut the deck and look at whatever card you cut to. And that's going to look very casual and also very fair because they've cut the cards themselves. But if you want, you can have them cut and then go into a more normal selection procedure and have them take a card out. If you have them take a card out from your hands, it's going to be easy for you to cut to that card so that you don't mix up the order of the cards. For all of these, it's important to note, you can't actually mix up the order of the cards. You can only cycle the order of the cards. So by cutting the deck, we don't change the actual cyclical order. It's only when we actually shuffle the cards together. So you can have them pick a card in this way, and all you have to do is peek the bottom card. So they pick the card, I tell them to not show me, show their friends and everything. That gives you enough time to peek the bottom card just by kind of turning the deck toward yourself. And you want to be casual with that. And you see that it's the 8 of diamonds. We go up to a jack from there, and it's a diamonds. So we know that it's going to go back to the cycle into C in chased order, which is clubs. So it's jack of clubs. So they're going to have their card memorized. You can even have it cut back into the deck if you'd like. And now you can do a number of things. You can write down a prediction. You can look at them and try to divine it. Presentation here is what's really great with something like a stack and being able to memorize the card quickly. Taking a page from, I saw Alex Pandrea and honestly many other magicians do this in different tricks, you can do a sort of narrow down procedure where you're kind of focusing on all the cards and you're just kind of thinking to yourself. But if you have these cards shown face up for too long, perhaps the stack could be seen, although I bet a lot of people wouldn't necessarily see it. I think the value of this though is that you're not looking at the cards. And so after you get that initial peek, I would encourage you to have them honestly keep the card in their pocket or place it back into the deck and then divine it in whichever way you desire, write a prediction down or seem to kind of catch it from them. So that can be your first trick. It's just a simple divining of the cards. So they pick that one. Here's another test. We go ace, which represents 1. We go up 3, which is a 4 of spades, which is the next suit. So we're going to be able to guess that it's the 4 of spades. That's a pretty good first trick in a series. So let's escalate now. Have them cut the deck again. And then you say, we're going to up the ante. Why don't you take out a clump of cards? So they take out a few cards right here. Here's where now, as they're holding the cards toward them, and they have, you do need to see how many they pick. So they have 6 here, 7. You're going to say, as I say a card, just turn the top card over and deal it down. So before you do that, you're going to get your peek once again as they're holding these cards towards themselves. And that's going to tell you where to start. So you get your peek to know where to start. And this is the great thing about this stack is that then you can start guessing sequentially what the next cards are. So you know that the next card is going to be the 2 of hearts. You go up 3 and next suit from there. You know the next card is going to be the 5 of spades. You go up 3 to the 8 of diamonds. And you go up 3 from there to the jack of clubs. So we would be able to keep going in this way, but you maybe want to encourage them not to take too big of a clump of cards because now the sequence will start to show, but you're going to be able to keep guessing the cards as they go forward, and that's a very impressive thing. Once they're done with that, make sure you place this all back on the top of the deck in the same order before you move on to anything else. So you can see how this is escalating. You've guessed one card, you've guessed another clump of cards, a few cards. Now, this might be a good time to do a false shuffle again. If you're wondering how to do a false shuffle, we've taught quite a few on the channel and you can check them out in our tutorials. But regardless, this is another great opportunity to shuffle the deck, invite them to cut it one more time, and then you're going to kind of stage a faux poker hand. I'm kind of translating this to a poker hand, although for the book's case, it was the game of hearts. So if you know how to play hearts, I guess this will apply more to you. I'm admitting some ignorance here. I don't really remember how to play hearts, but if I were to look that up, that would make it easier for the demonstration. But you're going to lay out a 4-hand game of hearts, and all you have to do to make this work is deal yourself last, and you need to have a heart on the bottom, okay? Because then there will be a heart right here in your hand. Just by cutting the deck to a heart on the bottom, you're going to be able to do this. Now, if you're wondering how to do that, if you've shuffled and they've cut, all you have to do is take a look at the bottom. If it's not a heart, all you have to do is find a heart. So you find a heart. You could even go further than that heart, find the next heart. So you have a clump of cards here, and you're going to hold all the cards above the heart, square back up, hold a break. That's under your pinky like this. And you're going to cut to that card, but you're just doing it casually. And you're doing it while you explain, like, look, you've cut the deck, we've mixed the cards, they're all different and in random orders. Here's what we can do. And it's while you're saying, here's what we can do, that you can just cut down, and now you're in order. By having a heart at the bottom, that's what's really important. All that you need is for a heart to be at the bottom in any situation. And by doing that, you're going to be able to deal 4 cards and you're going to give yourself a heart. So if you want to do it like poker, you can deal 5 cards to each hand sequentially. Now, the important thing to note is that this is going to ruin the stack. You would have to reverse the dealing that you just did in order to get back into stack. But you can use this as an ending of the stack and then shuffle the cards because you have dealt yourself all of these hearts. It'll be all hearts. If you want, you can escalate it and show that all of these cards are sequential as well, though that perhaps might ruin the illusion a bit more and show how all of these cards were in a sequence, right? The only other thing I would say is that if you want to make this a true royal flush in hearts, all you would have to do is cut to the 2 of hearts. So instead of just cutting to whatever heart you see, you can do a quick spread and show, see, all the cards are random and mixed, and you're going to pick up where the 2 of hearts is as you gather the cards together and you cut the 2 of hearts to the top, and there you're good to go, so that when you deal these out, you're perfect royal flush, all hearts. At this point, I would highly recommend you truly shuffling the cards and having the audience truly shuffling the cards, or doing a deck switch so that you can move on to normal tricks and they won't ever catch anything. But there you go, that's a full routine where you escalate from guessing 1 card, guessing multiple cards, and then seeming to show prowess at dealing yourself a winning poker hand. The spectator cuts to a random location in the deck and reveals 5 cards. They're given the choice to choose from any one of these cards, and there's nothing sneaky. They truly can pick any single one of these cards. So let's say they choose to think of this one as their card. The magician takes it, turns it over so that no matter where it is inside this packet, you'll know where it is. But with just a little magical snap, we actually make that card vanish from the cards, leaving only 4 cards right in front of their eyes. And where does it end up? Right in the wallet that's been on the table the entire time. Now, to do this trick, there's going to be a few things you prepare. First is duplicates of each of the 5 cards that the spectator is going to choose between. So for me, I picked out a duplicate Queen of Spades, 4 of Clubs, 3 of Diamonds, 7 of Spades, and Ace of Diamonds. But again, you could use any random cards. I like to throw in a face card and have a mix of red and black. So you're going to find those cards in a separate deck, and you're going to place those duplicates in the following locations. Now, if you know about the multiple out principle, you're probably getting ahead of me here and seeing where this is going, but I encourage you to watch till the end to see the intricacies of how each out can play out. So the first one is I put the queen here in the wallet. Now the other one that goes in the wallet is the ace, and I put it right here. Now there's a reason this works well. In one out, you're able to open to the queen, show that there's nothing else in here, and move on. In the other case, you're able to turn the wallet over, show this card, and that there's no other card in that pocket. In the deck, you're going to have one of the duplicates placed face up in the middle. Because of the force we use, I like to place it near the bottom, so that way when the spectator cuts the cards in half, they aren't cutting to the upturned card. So you have that card in the middle, and then one more of the duplicates on the bottom. So that's 2 in the wallet, 2 in the deck, and then you're going to have one last one inside the card box or under the card box, or I like to put it in the cellophane here. All you have to do is make sure that this isn't ever shown unless you need to reveal that card. So like I said, this is the multiple outs principle. We taught another video on this channel where the multiple outs were used to make it look like your prediction always worked. In this case, we're going to make it look as though their thought of card, which feels unforced, travels to an isolated or impossible location. The thing with multiple outs is that isolation aspect where it makes it look as though it is the only object in that location. So take your original 5 cards and place them on top of the deck, place the deck in the box, and when you perform this, you might want to throw out your wallet, your phone, your keys on the table so that it is there in full view the whole time. So I'm just going to place these 2 objects to the side, And let's get into the performance. We're once again going to use the cross-cut force, but you could use any force you want to. You could also use any false shuffles to get into this. But what you could do is show that all the cards are different by giving quick flashes while spreading across the top. The reason this is helpful is that you don't want to show the face-up card that's in the middle of the deck, and you also don't want to show the bottom card because we don't want them to see any duplicates. So once you've shown how all the cards are different, you are going to place the cards on the table, and like I said, we're using the cross-cut force. You can use a different one if you'd like. But if you've never learned that before, you're going to invite the audience to cut the deck into 2 piles, and then after they've done that, you're going to say, I'm just going to mark where you cut the cards. And when you do that, you place the cards in this orientation. And so by doing that, you're blatantly lying, but there's something psychological to this. You say that you're marking where they cut. This is where they cut. This is the top of the deck. But by doing this motion of they cut the deck into 2 piles and you say, I'm just going to mark that, and we'll get back to that in a minute. That is going to set them up to not really remember which card is which, and you're going to be able to force the card later. But for the cross-cut force to work, we need what's called time misdirection. So you're just going to talk about something for a second. In this case, something like, now when you cut the cards, you weren't thinking too much about it, so it's pretty much a random chance wherever this is going to end up. But I don't want to just give you a kind of random moment. I want you to make a choice as well. So in a moment, I'm going to have you make a very important choice, and it's important for you to know that whatever you pick out of that is what we'll go with, okay? So that's interesting, and that kind of frames the trick. And that's really all the time you need. So you can come over to here, and this was the top of the deck, but you're going to say, all right, I'm just going to go to where you cut, and I'm actually going to take a few cards out. And that'll set you up to then turn over the force cards. Turning them over at this point is helpful so that they don't feel like it's weird that you're seeing the cards. Something in the kind of card selection procedure that can be hard is if you do a spread and you have them pick a card and then you say, oh, it's okay for me to see it, you can turn it over. That can always feel clunky and weird. So you've given them this moment to cut the cards. Now you can say, all right, let's look at a few of the cards you cut to. So we're all looking at the cards, it's no big deal, right? Then you're going to take what was the top half of the deck and place it back on top. That will maintain this revelation in case you need it. And of course the 3 of diamonds is still in the middle face up as well. You can mix these cards up if you like, or have them mix them up, and you're just going to lay them out and say, now, are you drawn to any of these cards? Which card do you want to go with? Whichever card you go with, that is the one we will use. They'll pick their card, and let's just, for sake of argument, use one of the wallet cards for now. And they pick that card. You say, are you sure? You can change your mind. The great thing is they really can change their mind. So just assuming they don't, you're going to explain how you're going to isolate that card here so that we all can see where it is. And then you get this cool moment where we're going to use an Elmsley count. Now an Elmsley count is a sleight of hand move. Where you're able to hide cards essentially. There's a lot you can do with it, but in this case we're going to use it to hide this card. So you place it facing the other way between the bottom cards. So you can't place it here or here, you're going to place it right here. And by turning it the other way and placing it there, that'll set you up for this Elmsley count. And so here are some brief mechanics. Peel over with your thumb. Now I'm in my subordinate hand, I'm left-handed, so I'm actually in my right hand for this. And I like to peel over with my thumb a little bit, which gives my dominant hand the opportunity to pinch here in sort of this grip. I peel over and I deal into my subordinate hand. And then before I go to deal again, I'm actually going to peel over all the cards. And in this grip, in this little pincher grip, that's actually going to be pretty easy to do. You're just going to be able to push over a block of those 3 cards without too much hassle. So you've peeled and you're pushing over a block. Now after you've done that, you're also going to load this card back onto the bottom. So you load that card back onto the bottom as you take that big block of cards. You can then go straight into dealing that card normally and dealing this card normally. Now, they will see this card twice, but because they're kind of in different random cards, in a quick flash, what they'll notice is the fact that there's no face down card. So one more time, they see that this card is turned over and that it's the card they've chosen, and you're going to peel over, dump, and put this back underneath, and then deal out normally. And they'll see 4 face-up cards and not their face-down card. What you can then do is one by one peel until you reach 4 cards so that you don't flash this bottom card. You don't just freely spread, you're going to peel from that subordinate dealing hand like you're dealing cards individually, and you can show them. Now from here, there's going to be some things you can do to ditch this. But keep in mind, if you don't want to do all that sleight of hand, you can take these cards, you can mix it up, and you can pretend that it's gone away. You have to move on more quickly, but it is something you can consider if you're not feeling comfortable with the sleight of hand. But let's just say you've ended up here now, you know the rest, you're going to be able to reveal that the card has gone here. So from here, you can figure out what the rest is going to look like. If it wasn't the Queen of Spades they chose, maybe they chose the Ace of Diamonds, you make it vanish, you turn over the wallet and you show it. If they picked any of the other outs, the wallet can just stay there. You don't have to reference the wallet if that's not one of the outs they chose. If they chose the 3 of Diamonds, you spread the deck and you show the 3 of Diamonds. If they chose the 4 of Clubs, you make that vanish and you show the 4 of Clubs has ended up on the bottom of the deck, which was here the whole time. And then last, if they choose the 7 of Spades, once again, make that 7 vanish and then you show it under here. So do you see how that works? In all cases, what you want to present is, now look, you'll notice that I wasn't touching the deck this whole time, but now suddenly that 3 of Diamonds has traveled there, or that 4 of Clubs has traveled there. In the case of the box, you could say, I haven't been touching the box this whole time, it's traveled there. Now what about this lingering card here? Well, of course, when the time is right, you can place this on top and show that there's really only 4 cards left. Another thing you can do if you're comfortable with it is you can Gambler's Cop the bottom card away, which is where you kind of hold it in this grip. It's kind of toward the back of your hand. You can Gambler's Cop it away to your pocket. Welcome to the Erdnase triple cut, at least that's the name I remember it by. This is a nice little table false cut that will blend really nicely into any false table shuffles you're doing, any gambling demonstrations you're doing. Like I've been saying this month with these tutorials, these are gambling sleight of hand tutorials, but that doesn't mean you have to use them for gambling demonstrations. So the false cut is really simple. You're gonna start in this position that a lot of these false cuts start in on the table, with the sort of horizontal makeup where you have kind of this like pinching pose in your hands on both sides. And you're going to pull out the bottom packet with your dominant hand, and almost similar to like an up the ladder cut, you're going to create a little bit of a step where it's not fully flush, but it's about right here. So my subordinate hand is still here under this packet. So remember, this is the top packet, this is the bottom packet, but I've just brought that bottom packet to the top. After I've done that, I'm gonna hold the now bottom packet underneath and I'm gonna cut it into 2. So it's gonna be hard to see with this packet on top. So remember, we've brought the bottom packet up. It's here in a step pattern, but I'm gonna lay that to the side so you see what's happening underneath. This packet that's underneath gets cut into 2. My subordinate hand is on the upper part of it. So that allows my dominant hand to come over and for this hand to then come over on top of it, but it happens quickly. So in motion, we have something like this. So we've brought that bottom packet up, we've placed it for the step, we then regrip so we have the bottom, and that now top packet will fall as we do that cut that I just explained. And then remember, this is the true top, so we just want to make sure this half goes down first. A little clunky in slow motion, but in fast motion, you get something like that. This move is interesting to me because it's about as far as I'll go in a sleight of hand demonstration or magic trick without getting too fancy. There's times I like to show off, weird cuts and stuff like that. There's a whole brand of cardistry moves, but when it comes to a magic performance, I like to go for more boring looking procedures of cutting the deck because it's really not about that. You kind of want it to fade into the background and you want it to be convincing. And so for me, at least my philosophy is the more crazy a cut, the more suspicious it might be. Now, a lot of magicians and even myself in the past do like to use cardistry moves in order to supposedly demonstrate a shuffle sequence, but it's actually a false cut. I think that's drawing too much attention to the shuffle sequence. For me, what matters in that moment is that the audience is convinced that the card is lost. So I would just caution you to think about that. If you're doing a false cut that's really fancy looking for the purpose of losing the audience's card in the deck, you might want to reconsider that and do something a little simpler when it comes to losing the card. That's all to say, this looks just a little fancy. You know what I mean? Like, you have this kind of dramatic moment in this drop and place down, but it doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look too fancy, too weird, or too technical. It just looks like you're a guy who knows how to cut the deck. So what could you do with this cut? Well, of course, like I said, you could just lose a card in the deck and go from there. But if you're doing it in a gambling demonstration, let's say you've just done a false table shuffle, and maybe you've also done an up the ladder cut, you can add this as kind of one extra cut so that they're really convinced the deck is shuffled. Then you can go on to demonstrate that you have a perfect royal flush or whatever it might be. But regardless, it does keep the whole stock of the deck, not just the top card or top group of cards. It keeps the whole deck in order. So if you also combine all those false shuffles with that, you can of course show that the deck is in new deck order at the end, or in any order you want. You could separate the reds and the blacks, whatever you want to do. When it comes to getting comfortable practicing it, this is another one of those cuts that I think this is true for a lot of them actually. You might get caught accidentally still gripping this top part when you're trying to come out underneath it. And that's where practice will help you to really nail down where you're gripping the cards. You have to adjust your grip to come under this packet and not still be gripping it when you come out with this packet. You also don't want to accidentally be gripping this packet because you placed it too close to your subordinate hand. So those are all the moments where you can get caught. Another thing to really pay attention to is how you tilt your subordinate hand down, and this hand, really both hands, so that you lower that packet down and you can bring them all on top. But don't get too stressed about it looking a little messy if you're running into like this flopping in a weird place, because it is just a cut at the end of the day. And if there's a little bit of sloppiness, I think that communicates the idea of shuffle to your audience. So if the packets aren't perfectly clean, as long as you've retained the stocks that you need to and you have it in the order you want, it can look a little messy. It's no big deal. Come in with these fingers here, your thumb here, push down, and that's going to create that pressure. So you squeeze in, create that pressure. You should get comfortable where you are holding the cards like this with all this built up pressure, but you're able to come away and you're not yet going to release the cards. So get into that position, and then your other hand is then going to be able to receive the cards in straddle grip. So prepare for a straddle grip with your other hand. In your dominant hand, you're releasing off the thumb. So it's actually from squeezing enough, you're squeezing so that the cards will peel off of your thumb. And in slow motion, what's happening is they're peeling off the thumb into the other hand. So it'll look like that. Now, when you do this at first, because your hands aren't used to it, don't be surprised if you get this action where it kind of, it'll like jut out. I also would encourage you, I know that, I believe this is accurate, that some people actually do like to do it fully vertically. That builds up a lot more pressure and I think makes the spring even more difficult. So by doing this diagonal action, I'm just able to control it much better. So remember that pressure, remember your fingers. I will say, now that I'm actually getting into what I'm used to, the index provides a little bit of work, but I'm mainly experiencing it here in the middle. And remember to use that straddle grip to receive the cards. Once you're more comfortable with it, you will definitely be able to extend your hands, but just getting in the knack of doing the pressure buildup and release is where you're going to start. Now, when it comes to cards, they're meant to be able to snap back into position, but they'll start to take a bend in one direction or another. So it might help to also spring the cards face up and face down, just alternate that to kind of pay attention to the straightness of the cards. How's it going, guys? My name is Michael, and this is the Up the Ladder cut. Now, I love this move as I think it's a perfect follow-up to a false riffle shuffle, which we're going to be hosting on the channel here, so you can link a lot of the videos I'm doing this month to make a nice demonstration of gambling sleight of hand or to use in magic tricks. So the Up the Ladder table shuffle looks something like this, and you can repeat it as much as you want depending on the packet size as it runs out, and it just looks very kind of elegant in a way, but it does look like a true mixture that you would see being done at a card table as you're playing card games. It's something that you feel like a dealer would do, and that's where it fits in with this ecosystem of gambling sleight of hand moves. So begin from the table. As always, I gotta remind you, I'm left-handed, so you might need to mirror this. So you're gonna hold the deck with your subordinate hand, and you're just gonna come over and you're gonna grip a large portion of the upper half of the deck with your dominant hand. And we're pulling it over just to the side a little. The goal is that you don't have to pull it over much, but as you're practicing this move, if you need more of a discrepancy at first, that's okay. But at a certain point, it might not actually be easier to pull this all the way across because you are going to need your other hand to help you. So after you've pulled this over a little, you're then going to clip a large portion of these cards with your index and the rest of your thumb, even as the thumb is still here at the base with your middle finger. So you can almost consider this like the middle finger is here for the bottom packet, your index is here for the top packet. So that's all kind of anchored there. What that'll allow you to do is, as you've created this step here, you're then going to peel out a small portion of cards with your dominant hand, bring them around, and place them flush with that original bottom packet. So what you've done here is you've taken the bottom part of this half and put it over here. What that allows you to do is then strip this out easily. That goes down, and that was originally on the bottom of this. So if you were to just put the deck together flush now, it would still be in the order it was. That motion is what allows you to do the cut. So then you're gonna do that. So that's the whole motion, because now that we're back here in this step pattern, we're gonna take a small portion of cards, we're clipping here, place it on top, and then strip out the deck. Clip out a small portion of cards, strip out the deck. 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 So something that you're hopefully wanting to be able to do with this move is speed, right? But at first, it's going to be just getting that motion down and understanding the mechanics. Once you've gotten the motion down a little bit more, you will be able to work on your speed. But you'll probably run into a little bit of catching. So what am I talking about? It might look a little bit like this, where cards get lost in this strip out here from you have the packet held on the step, and as you start to slide out, you might not have a full grip where you have two separate packets, but you have packets and some cards getting lost in between. So of course, paying attention to your fingers is going to help with that. But I noticed that when the move goes better for me as opposed to worse is when I do a clean pull and I don't go forward too much too quickly. So I pull out and come around as opposed to going out, because going out can get the cards caught on the middle finger and they can kind of get lost and not be gripped by anything. But if you do a clean pull out like so, you can get in a better rhythm where you're able to pull it more smoothly, because it's not getting pivoted off or slipping through anything. In this trick, you're going to learn how to have the spectators deal the cards themselves, and you're going to be able to predict the cards they dealt to. Welcome back to another mentalism card trick. Now, if you think this sounds like Gemini twins, it might sound similar, but this is a different trick with a different method. But if you want another cool mentalism trick, be sure to check out that video on the channel. But no, this trick is the deal down force. So if you've never heard of it before, I'm excited to show it to you. And just as a reminder, this is March mentalism. So we have a few different mentalism tricks that are going to be going up. So be sure to check all of those out. But the deal down force involves the simple memorization of, in this case, we're going to memorize the top 2 cards, or you could memorize maybe the bottom cards and you shuffle them to the top. but you need to know what the top 2 cards are. Now, if you're adept at loading cards, you could even have a pre-written prediction. Like in this case, I have these 2 cards written down. I could carry that around in my wallet, and if I'm able to retrieve and load those cards to the top, I can then perform this trick. But you don't have to have a prediction ahead of time. You could just pretend to divine these cards, but this is the deal down force. So you're gonna hand the cards to your spectators, and it'd be helpful to maybe have 2 participants, and they're going to deal down the cards. You're gonna explain to them to just deal the cards down. And then from a few different magicians, I learned kind of the subtlety that after they've dealt those top 2 cards down, the force cards, you can then invite them to deal multiple cards at a time if they want. And then they can deal clumps of cards from the middle or bottom if they want. So they're allowed to mix it up. And then you can have a choice. They can either go all the way through the deck, or they can stop if they want. If you give the option for them to stop, it almost adds like one more element of choice, right? And so that's just from different magicians I've seen kind of take on this principle. Now, this principle is very old. It's over 100 years old, but you can add on to it in those different ways. So let's say they stop here. They've been given the choice to deal from wherever they want, it seems. The only thing is you're making sure that you have them deal down one at a time at first, right? And then you can let them remix it, and then you can let them stop. From there, you're going to have them deal the cards into 2 piles. And here's why it might be helpful to have 2 participants so that it represents their 2 cards, but you don't really have to. If it's just 1 participant, you can have them memorize 2 cards, right? So here's why this works. By dealing the cards from the top at first, and then making sure they stayed at the bottom once they were dealt down, by simply dealing down into 2 piles, you will end up with the force cards. But doesn't it feel so free? It feels so free and fair for them to deal the cards down, and then they're able to deal down however they want. And it doesn't feel like you ever had them particularly deal the top cards down. And then the fact that it reverses back to this, it just kind of gets lost in the shuffle, so to speak, of where they are. So just to recap this real quick, you start with these cards on top, instruct them to deal the cards down, and they're going to deal them like they would in a game. Now, when you're instructing this, they should know to deal them down one at a time at first. You're just saying like, hey, deal the cards down like you would in a game of cards. So they're going to start dealing them down. And then you say, you know what? Go ahead and, if you want to deal multiple cards at a time, you can do that. If you want to deal them from the middle, you can do that. Feel free to mix it up. So they'll start mixing it up a little. Maybe they'll deal from the middle. Maybe they'll deal from the top, bottom. And then because of that, they might get rid of the cards more quickly. But like I said before, you can give them the option to stop if they feel like stopping. So they'll stop, put the rest of the cards away. And then here is where you're going to say, okay, now one at a time. So you can say it casually, but you do want to make sure they deal it one at a time at this point. So you explain, deal one at a time, and they're going to do so. And just as a way of recap, those are kind of the presentational tips that get you into this position. And we deal all the way through, and we end up with the 2 cards. So if you want to take this a step further, I've seen this done with like the 4 aces, for example, but that just takes a little bit longer. You also, if you're familiar with magician's choice techniques, you can just focus on having 1 card forced, but I don't know, there's other ways to force 1 card. If you have this situation where you're using the multiple piles, it might be better to just use it to your advantage and predict the multiple cards that you're forcing. Another way that I've really been learning to take advantage of card forces is that you can use them to force numbers. So let's say you want to force a number in a creative way. You can have the number you want to force represented by 2 to maybe up to 4 or 5 cards, and you can have that many cards, of course, on the top, and then you go through the procedure, and then you have 4 or 5 piles dealt out, and that's going to seem really fair that they picked those numbered cards. And then you can reveal it on a receipt if you have that number that you forced. You can have it on a serial number on a dollar bill. That's a pretty common way for magicians to reveal things. Heck, you could even reveal the last 4 digits of your phone number or something, right? So using the values of cards is a great way that magicians have then been able to integrate numbers into their tricks. And so that's a really cool way that you can do a magic trick. And that just feels like really good street style magic. The great thing about this force in conjunction with using it as a number force is that it actually makes sense. I think you need to consider your tools in magic. There are some forces or some techniques that really wouldn't integrate well with a number force. But if you think about it, you give them the cards, they're dealing cards down, blah, 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 and then you deal it into these separate piles that kind of has a sequential feeling to it, so that when they get to whatever your force number is, of course I didn't set it up in this situation, but let's say we wanted to force these 4 numbers, it just feels right. It feels like it goes with the impossibility of then predicting it on the serial number or whatever it may be. So that is the deal down force. At least that's kind of how I like to refer to it. I believe the kind of category that this is in mentalism and in card magic would be called like a reverse deal. So there are other ways that people have used the idea of dealing down and reversing it. There's actually quite a plethora, but this is kind of your basic go-to version, where if you have 2 cards loaded on the top that you want them to select, you can then use that dealing down and then get a clump and then deal 1 by 1 into those things. You are reversing the deal. And by reversing that deal, they force the cards on themselves. So they're dealing it themselves. Just feels really fair and fun. Let's learn how to roll a coin. So you want to get a coin you're comfortable with. That could be a $1 coin, could be a $half size coin. Now, if you're using smaller change, I would actually encourage you to consider finding a $half size coin if you can. In a lot of cases, I think this is just the sweet spot for a lot of magicians, where it's larger than pocket change, and so you get the advantages of that, but it's also not so large as a $1 coin. So maybe you start with this. So you're going to grab your coin, and your thumb is going to clip it against your index finger, and you're holding your hand like a fist, where the elevation of your fingers are moving in this sort of way, where they're each going to hinge the coin over. So you get your hand in that position, you clip against the index finger, and of course you can see what's happening is that the coin rolls across, but what you're going to find is that your fingers will not have that sort of runway built in. So how do you get into that, and how do you get them to start doing it? Well, I believe I heard this from Rick Holcomb, who's a great coin magician, and he's on YouTube as well. And he talked about picturing the line not going from this part of your hand all the way down, but actually going diagonally. And I don't know what it is about that, I guess the way our hands are and the way the coin rolls, but if you picture the coin going down a diagonal line, by the time it's here, instead of thinking I need to get it clipped right in there, I'm actually using this vertex of my ring finger here. I'm almost picturing it headed toward that vertex of the knuckle, and that gives me a context point of how I want to move my finger. So I move my finger down. Now when you get here to the pinky, you can clip, and after you clip, you come under, and I like to just push it up with my thumb and go all the way down again. Now some experts like to actually reverse the action and have the coin roll backwards. I'm still working on that. And so that's just another encouragement for you, is that this really is just a training your hand thing. So it's a learned skill, it's a practice skill, and you just have to do it over and over again until it becomes smooth. So your hand will be shaky, it might even ache after you try it for too long and you need to take a break, but I encourage you to just come back to the move. So again, a slow-mo is you're clipping it here, and you're going to try to move it in a diagonal line. So you lift that middle finger, let it come down, lift that ring finger, let it come down, and then clip on the pinky and push it back up. That is the basic move. Troubleshooting. If you're finding yourself clipping the coin where you try to roll it and it ends up getting clipped in your finger, you are allowing it to fall too deeply into the crevices in your hand. So you're almost imagining it dancing across your fingers. In order to do that, you want to do something that might feel counterintuitive at first, which is to try to grip only a small portion of the coin. So don't try to get a hold of it, because then it might not come over. You're going to try to grip just enough of the coin for it to roll. So you're just barely clipping it, or at least it might feel like you're barely clipping any of the coin. That way it actually rolls and it doesn't go too far into your fingers. So just clip just enough of it so that it'll pop over. And that sort of built up potential energy will release. Gravity will bring it down so that if I weren't to keep going, it would just rest on this finger. But that puts it in a position now where this finger can clip it and bring it on forward. In motion, which this is hard to show in slow motion, it's not only the next finger coming down to clip it, but a little bit of this finger pushing, and it'll all kind of come together in tandem where the previous finger is pushing and the next finger is pulling down. Pushing up and pulling down. But they're very small movements. A bit of a stylistic preference, and this might just be me, but I don't like having my fingers as extended. I don't like having them like loosey-goosey, where like your fingers are out and you're just letting it dance across. I like this sort of fist that you hold until you roll the coin back up. And to me, that just looks more elegant. I don't know about you. You can do it the way you want, but that's just another note as well. And then last, I encourage you to hold a coin in your pocket, and whenever you get the chance to do this, to just take it out and roll it. So any moment that you're, I don't know, waiting in line, even if you're doing something else, like if you're on your phone, you can hold this in your other hand and do this. Now, when it comes to public life, this is a piece of metal. And so if you're dropping it often while practicing out in public, maybe you're at a coffee shop or something, people will notice. And if you keep dropping it too many times, you might not feel super comfy continuing to do that. So you might not be able to do this in every situation, but just carry it around with you, and you never know what time or situation will arise where you're able to just keep practicing it. Again, if you're okay with it, even while you're walking, you can take it out as long as you're okay with dropping it and picking it back up. So be safe, be smart, but look for the opportunities you have, because this really is just a keep doing it kind of move. So case in point, over here on my left hand, I am getting better, but I still fidget sometimes. Now, ironically, this is my dominant hand, so it should be stronger. But as I've learned with many magic moves, or in this case, just a flourish, it's not always about which hand is stronger. It's just about training the hand to get used to the motion, because anything that's unfamiliar to your hands, they're going to need to be trained. And amazingly enough, it'll become a very comfortable feeling thing. You'll actually find yourself wanting to do it as sort of a fidget. And this is a magic channel, so in terms of theory around doing this, you know, some magicians don't like to look skilled with their props, and I can understand some of that, and you don't want to showboat, but it can be kind of fun in the context of a coin routine to do a little bit of a flourish before making the coin vanish. So I think there is a place for it. Welcome to this tutorial. Now in March, I've been doing mentalism tutorials, and so this kind of falls under that category, but today we are talking about the key card principle. So let's get right into this. The key card principle is to simply memorize a card that then will go next to another card. So let's say we're going to have a card selected, and it's the Ace of Spades. While you're looking at the Ace of Spades, I, as the magician, am simply going to peek at the bottom card. I'm just going to turn the deck toward myself. I'll have plenty of time to, especially if I encourage you as the audience member to show all your friends this card or really make sure I don't see it. That gives me a moment to kind of relax and peek the bottom card. So now in my head, it's just, this is the Six of Spades, this is the Six of Spades, this is the Six of Spades. And so then they're going to be able to place the card on top. And then all we have to do to keep the key card principle at play is we're going to place the card on top, we're going to cut the deck, and when we cut the deck, the Six of Spades ends up next to the Ace of Spades. So I don't even have to know that you've selected the Ace of Spades. When I go through the deck now, I'm going to be able to see that the card above the Six of Spades is your selection. The reason this works is that when the deck was in this orientation, and then we cut it, when you cut a deck, you're actually cycling in order. You could almost imagine this as a wheel. And so all you're doing is creating different breaks in the wheel. And so now we've put those two back together. So anytime you cut a deck of cards, the bottom and top card end up together, which you don't always think about, but that's what's happening. So by putting that card next to the key card, I don't even have to have seen your card to now be able to memorize and see that this is your card. So how can we make this a little more interesting? Well, one thing you can do is you can invite the audience member to cut the cards themselves, maybe even a couple times. And that way they feel like they've mixed the cards as well. And it's, again, still, I can find that key card and I can see the selection that it's next to. Another thing you might do if you're a little more experienced in Magic is you can do false shuffles. We teach some false shuffles on this channel, so if you want to go into that, you can do false shuffles and then seem to still divine the card because it'll still be next to the key card. The thing with that is just the fact that you can only do cuts. You can only do single cuts like this. Now, you could probably get away with more risky shuffles, but if you want to be surefire, you only want to cut the deck. You don't want to do anything more complicated than that. The reason is any true shuffle would risk the key card being separated from the selection. So let's see if it did this time. It may or may not, but we had the 6 of spades and the ace of spades. See, look now, the 8 of spades got in the middle of the 2 of them. So if you do a true shuffle of a deck of cards, you're always running that risk. So like I teach with any of my mentalism tricks, you can get your key card, like let's say this time it was the Queen of Spades. You can find that it's the King of Diamonds, and you can just do some acting to pretend. Another thing you can do is you can show that the cards are all mixed. Get your key card, get your memorized card down, so you know it's the King of Diamonds, and you just put it away, and you can look into their eyes and try to divine the card. You can write the card down. Just by adding a little bit of acting, it kind of helps for it to not just be so simple as a boom, I've guessed it. And that way they don't backtrack to it. But here's a really cool trick from a very old book. This is an over 100-year-old trick. And this kind of dresses it up even more. So what you're going to do is you're going to have your key card memorized. And so for demonstration's sake, we know that it's the King of Diamonds, okay? But our key card is the Queen of Spades. Watch how this turns out. So you've cut the cards, maybe you false shuffle, you have them cut the cards, and then you're going to have the participant themselves deal the cards into 2 piles. So here's how this math works with an even numbered deck of cards. So there's 52 cards in this deck. With an even numbered deck of cards, the selection is going to end up sequentially 1 card less than the key card. Why is that helpful? Well, all I have to do is look at these cards, and I'm going to find the Queen of Spades. Now, here's where the acting comes in. I'm going to place my hands over these, look at them, and I'm going to say, you know what? I don't think your card is in this pile. You pick it up, and you're going to say, I'm just going to double check, and you count 1 in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In this deck, now you know that their card is the 11th card. Let's test it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You see how that works? So you subtract 1 in your head, and you know that their card is going to be the 11th card. Here's why this dresses up the principle. Under the guise of, okay, pick a card, we mix the card in. All right, go ahead and deal the deck into 2 piles, and I'm going to see which pile your card is in. You're going to do some mentalism work and make it look like you're really doing something, and you just find the key card. Now you know it's not in this pile, but under the acting of, I'm just going to double check it's not in this pile, and maybe you look up at them and, oh, I'm trying to test if this is it. You're just counting in your head, and so once you've counted to that 12th card that the Queen of Spades is at, now you know the 11th card is what their card is. But you don't even have to do this part in your head. You can just say, okay, I know it's not in here, and you gather this up. You could say, in fact, I have a hunch. I think it's the 11th card in this pile. Then this is really cool. You have them count to the 11th card. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that is pretty cool. And that kind of separates it from feeling like, oh, you just looked at something and you got it down, and it's going to be much more impressive.